Well, he said, enjoy government, son, and it's time to welcome another First Minister.
For more years than most of us can remember, there's been an abiding sentiment in Scotland for some form of self-government. No one, but no one, will make a better job of running Scotland than the people who live here. Government...
Oh, I think it exceeded everybody's expectations. I mean, Jim and I were conscious in the last couple of days of the campaign that the argument was flowing towards us. I mean, we were winning the debates hand down on the television, and the feeling and the reception in the streets was very good. But I don't think anyone expected to get the overwhelming vote on both questions.
No more deals, no coalition. The Scottish National Party has the numbers in Parliament here in Edinburgh to govern alone. Delivering on their manifesto depends on decisions in Westminster. But the numbers are extraordinary in a voting system that makes majorities much harder to achieve.
I'm honoured to announce that on Thursday, the 18th of September 2014, we will hold Scotland's referendum, a historic day where the people will decide Scotland's future. Few societies anywhere on earth have secured this opportunity to vote themselves into independence. This is an opportunity peacefully at the ballot box in a process which has been agreed and consented.
We obviously have a deep interest in making sure that one of the closest allies that we will ever have remains a strong, robust, united and effective partner.
For me as leader, my time is nearly over. But for Scotland, the campaign continues and the dream shall never die.
Please welcome Alex Salmond. Have a seat. Great to see you, Mr. Salmond. Alec, thank you for being here. 25 years of devolution. You were there right at the start. You're still there today. How are you reflecting?
Well, I'm not still there today. That's the key problem. I mean, I can see that, absolutely. It's been absolutely fast. I've been sitting in the front row staring everybody out, And I'd just like to say to Jack, I have never met Vladimir Putin. So there you go.
What can we say about that? I mean, it's been a huge era. What I find fascinating about this, by the way, is that we obviously have Alec here, and we have his chief of staff here as well, and nowhere else do you get that. Alex Salmond, and the man, by the way, who claims to have run the country for a number of years. What's his name?
What's his name? Yes.
It's Geoff over there.
Oh, right. Geoff.
Yeah. I'm the guy you sacked 7 times.
Yeah, you know.
Absolute true story.
You're looking older, Geoff.
Geoff, how do you reflect on time in government, first of all, and then we'll get Alec's reflections? Because, I mean, we saw some of it there, the story of Alex Salmond in the context of devolution, but I want your reflections first, then Alex.
Well, I really think it's important we go back to the start for a second, but I know you're asking. So, when we got elected in 2007, we were driving from the count, and I don't know if everyone remembers in the room, but there was a problem with the counting system. Do you remember? There was electronic voting the first time we'd done it. Nobody actually knew who'd won or who'd lost. And we were coming home from the Markcliffe, and I asked him, and I says, have we won? We didn't know. And he says, no, I think we've actually fallen short. And obviously that wasn't the case, but we decided anyway to get in a helicopter, as Wendy Alexander pointed out, go to Prestonfield and say, bugger it, we're just going to say we won, and we landed there. The whole idea was to be presidential and all the rest of it. But the serious point is those 4 years from that election onwards, I think, again, I might be biased, but I thought we were extremely effective. And we were effective because of what Henry McLeish said earlier. We had to seek consensus. We had a plurality of 1 seat. I think it was 47 for SNP, 46 Labour. And I suppose my question to you, former boss, is, do you agree with me? I mean, that was electric, those 4 years. We had to fight every day like a campaign day. We didn't know if we were going to be in office by the end of every week. It was unbelievable.
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you all for coming.
We had a plurality of one. We had a confidence and supply agreement with the Greens, who had two, although I was never quite sure about the confidence and supply. But the other thing to remember, I mean, you might think it's impossible to run a parliament with 129 members in the Scottish Parliament. You've got 47 seats. How do you run a parliament? Well, the thing to remember is there's three other significant parties. So all you have to do is to find things that one of them agree on. And anything that one of them agree on, you can pass as legislation. The other thing that was a huge advantage in that Parliament was that the people who came in, the MSPs, were not novices. And certainly many of them were new to a Parliament. But they'd been in the trenches, they'd been labouring in the vineyards of politics without any hope of election in many cases up until then. People like Gil Patterson, Jim Mather, Kenny McCaskill, Nicola Sturgeon, obviously, Fiona Hislop, a whole range of people with, we're talking earlier about people with life experience before their MS. Now, all these people had to earn a living before they could possibly be elected. For all of the people, particularly for the members who came in 2007, being elected was just the most amazing thing. It was a privilege. Nobody in that group had any sense of entitlement. They all thought it was a privilege. So they were in the trenches every single day, knowing that the government potentially could fall. And I've never experienced solidarity in any political party or seen solidarity like that, because that group was in the cauldron, in the heat of fire on a daily basis.
It was interesting that they said you had confidence and supply with the Greens, and my ears pricked up a little bit because I seem to remember you being propped up by Annabel Goldie rather than by the Green Party.
Yeah, well, obviously Annabel was my supplier. The confidence came from elsewhere. but it was often said that. I mean, firstly, I should say.
Did you get any? I mean, was it easy? Did she ask? Could she have got more from you than she asked for?
Well, David McCletchie did most of the negotiation with Bruce Crawford. And Bruce is another person with great life experience and, in the right job as a business manager. They used to say that the definition of an honest American politician was someone who, when bought, stayed bought, right? Well, David McCletchie, his word was his bond. So if he made a deal, then he stuck to it. And that's, you can operate and come to terms with people like that. And of course, it wasn't the case that we always relied on the Conservatives. I mean, in some issues, well, ironically enough, tuition fees, for example, we abolished tuition fees with the support of the Liberal Democrats. As Jim was saying, the very issue which was to be the undoing of the UK Liberal Democrats a few years later, but their votes were vital to abolish tuition fees. The Labour Party voted with us to abolish bridge tolls, the Tories on the small business bonus. So what you had to do was to prioritise those of your policies which had attractions in one of the other three parties. And once you did that, then you could pass your measures and also not to set the bar too high. If we'd taken the attitude that if we got beat in a parliamentary vote, then we went off in the huff. That SNP administration would have lasted 6 months until we got beat on the Edinburgh trams. We'd have been off away and saying, "Oh well, we're taking our ball home because we've been beaten." So you set the bar, saying, "Look, what matters is a budget vote or a vote against one of your ministers. Everything else is." We can forget about.
Yeah. Let me come in. I really want to return. You told me a story yesterday in preparation for this event I had never heard before, and that's surprising given you like to
probably
speak.
Wasn't true then.
Well, let's find out. But we've talked a lot about Donald Dewar tonight. Tell us about your relationship with him in the campaign for devolution.
Well, it was fascinating actually, and Wendy touched on it earlier on. I mean, Donald and I had an uneven relationship with let's put it that way, through the years. As you would expect, I mean, you've shown clips from the Usher Hall debate, where, you know, that was back in 1992, which was a very good night for me, and Donald took a lot of stick for that. Although actually, on a key question, he gave one of the best answers I've ever heard. What does Scotland mean to you? And Donald gave a marvellous answer about literature and heritage, and a wonderful answer. But you know, it was he got pretty bad reviews on it. And then, of course, George Robertson took over the Shadow Secretary of State, and in one of Tony Blair's better decisions, he brought back Donald as Secretary of State to steer through devolution. And Donald was Donald had been a generation who was scarred by the 79 experience, when devolution was expected and then fell at the last hurdle. And he was absolutely determined that wouldn't happen again. And therefore, he knew to do that, we had to come to terms. Now, the election in 1997, I think it was the 1st of May. The following week, I was in Dover House, which is the headquarters of the old Scottish office in Whitehall in London. And Donald used to say that he timed the invitations for me to come in for our discussions when Brian Wilson, the anti-devolutionist Minister of State, was away in Scotland. so as he's Minister of State, Henry was fine, because Henry was pro-devolution, but he didn't want Brian to know how often I was in there. And we had to find a formulation, not that would just ensure SNP's support for the referendum, but would hold us together in a referendum campaign. And as Wendy rightly said, I think on by the 25th of that month of May 1997, we found that formulation, which Donald, in a prearranged intervention, cross-question, as he was introducing the referendum bill, stated, look, you know, he said that he would never deny the right of the Scottish people to self-determination. He, of course, was a convinced devolutionist. But of course, other parties had the right to pursue their end of independence. And then he went on to say, look, not just they have the right to do it and they could do it, they should do it, if that is their aim and ambition. And of course, that gave us the platform that would hold together in a referendum campaign. So when, you know, Tam Dalyell or Donald Finlay or the Tories said, look, how can you agree, you're for independence, he's for devolution? You know, who's right? Either Donald or myself had to say, look, the decision will be for the Scottish people. What we agree on is the essential democracy and the right of the Scottish people to self-determination. And that was the agreement that held two parties through a referendum campaign. Two parties who'd been, you know, at each other's, if not each other's throats, then certainly going hell for leather and toe-to-toe for some considerable time.
I find that fascinating, actually, and then it plays back to what Henry was saying about the consensus that actually was established, that perhaps people wouldn't appreciate in today's climate. So we've talked about 2007, we've talked about devolution. I want to just move to I'm sure everyone would accept, the biggest day in Scotland's political history, which was the referendum day, and the run-up to that. And I think we've got a couple of clips or stills I want to just show you, because you and I fundamentally disagree on this, as you know. But that was the poll, the famous poll that put yes ahead, 52-48. We know subsequently that the UK government had private polling showing yes was at 55-45. And that was 10 days or so before polling day. And we did something, if we bring up the next clip, we did something I profoundly regret as an advisor, and we went crowd surfing. And this was actually a day in Leith, if I remember rightly, with Jim Sillars, yourself, and Nicola, and your good friend Patrick Harvey there.
Oh, it's a very happy
But if you recall, at that moment, I believe, anyway, that the people were excited at the prospect of independence. I believe there was a natural majority for independence. I think it was there to be won. I think the polling was right, particularly the UK government polling. But they came up, they cancelled Parliament, Ed Miliband, David Cameron, Nick Clegg, Gordon Brown, they came up, they did these sober analysis speeches. And if you remember at the time, it was absolutely ridiculous. It was wall-to-wall media coverage, worldwide, but particularly obviously in Britain. And they were doing sober speeches saying, oh, this is too much of a risk. And we went crowd surfing. We went round the communities and we thought that was winning it. And we spoke to our own folk. We didn't speak to the people that were teetering. What do you say to that analysis?
Well, I mean, clearly all the good decisions in the campaign were mine, and, and the bad decisions were my advisors who were arranging events such as that. I mean, pretty obvious.
But it was a bad decision, though.
I think Geoff's beating himself up too much on this one. When the Yes campaign, when we had the Edinburgh Agreement of 2012, right, and I signed the agreement with David Cameron to have the referendum, rather inconveniently that day, because it was a good day, a historic day, a consented referendum to allow people in Scotland, a referendum created, born in the Scottish Parliament. And there's a YouGov poll showing independence at 28%, which was sort of inconvenient, that very day. And what you have to understand is you're coming from a long way back with an absolute certain expectation on everybody's part that it's going to be a walkover for the No campaign. And therefore, for the Yes to win, and I always thought the Yes could have won, you had to do absolutely everything right. You had to hit everything absolutely top notch. And basically, in my estimation, what happened, we got to the front, I agree with you on that, maybe 10 days before. That allowed Westminster, the imperial power to regroup, as you said, the Free Amigos to come up to Scotland. But the crucial thing, in my estimation, was this. There is a swing vote in Scotland. And incidentally, on your polling, it's still there. That is people who want proper powers for their parliament over the economy and a range of other things, but are hesitant about independence. And whether independence wins or not depends on how that group of people decide to vote. So therefore, in my estimation, when the vow offered people all of the powers of a parliament, near federalism, without any of the uncertainty of independence, and when that was backed up by some vigorous speeches from Gordon Brown with a few days to go, and helped, of course, by the entire press corps campaigning for it, then, you would expect that on that key section of the population, it only has to be 5% to swing the vote 55 to 45 to 45, 55 the other way. And that was you might say that's an intelligent message from the No campaign. But at the end of the day, you look at things two ways. You can either say, right, we lost, or you can say, well, in a campaign over a 2-year period, we came from 30% to 45%. The day I left office, I thought it was a done deal, not against independence. I thought the heavy lifting had been done. I saw your poll there saying, 38% of people expect independence in the next 10 years? Day after referendum, it was 70%. And their expectation at that stage was right. So much had been gained, it had become the division in politics. And really what we've got to do is to recapture that expectation and have the positivity to take the nation forward.
Alex Salmond, thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for watching. Press subscribe and you'll get all the best videos offering insight on Scottish politics delivered straight to your feed. Press subscribe and stick around. And if you'd like to hear our conversations in full, open up your podcast app and search for Holyrood Sources.